Hello, lovelies. Welcome to this episode of Lessons from the Universe with Jennifer Hall. I look forward to sharing my channeled message with you today, and if you love it, please remember to like, share, review, and subscribe. So, when I was thinking about what we should talk about today, I kept thinking about the three wise men. Who were these dudes and what were they really doing? And then, of course, what's the metaphysical, right? The spiritual, the awakening message behind their story. So before we get into the metaphysics of it all, I actually think it's really important that we talk a little bit about the history, okay? This is the history, not necessarily the biblical history, the history. We start there. So shortly after Jesus was born, his family went into hiding from Herod. And biblically, we get very little information, just that Herod sort of lost his mind and and thought that this Messiah was coming and wanted to kill him, so put a death sentence on all of the children. This is the widely, very much abbreviated version of the story, but there's a lot more to this story. So Herod was the Roman appointed king of Judea. He built a lot of things and he raised the prosperity and he did some good stuff. But as most politicians are, as some politicians are, he was crooked and a little bit crazy. He was actually Arab in origin and a practicing Jew. And along the path of his life, he became friends with two people I'm sure most of you have heard of. He became friends with Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. And through this friendship and all of the discussions that must have taken place during the day, they actually granted him Roman citizenship, and Herod started his political career shortly thereafter. He actually ended up having to flee Rome during the Civil War of 40 BCE, and then he was nominated for the king of Judea, which he served as for 32 years. Can you imagine if our king, our president, had a reign of 32 years? So fast forward. Other things happen, as you can imagine, right? Anthony ends up having an affair with Cleopatra, and Cleopatra takes a bunch of Herod's best land, sort of manipulating Herod through Mark Antony. Awesome. Then another mutual friend, Octavian, comes along and helps him get his land back. And then, as you can imagine, there is some political debt that comes into place. So Herod does some cool stuff. He builds fortresses and palaces. And for a long time, he was a pretty decent dude. Then age, right? Age and senility start to take root in this human. And he becomes quite cruel. The Pharisees are rejecting him because, and from their point of view, he's a foreigner, and he starts to become more and more paranoid and gets this really violent, jealous streak surrounding his wife, Marimane, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. You know, he was married, and he left her to marry this other woman, you know, to help solidify his political status, right? All of the sort of twisted politics of the day. And so then his very loving, family poisons his mind even further throughout this paranoia. Enter his sister and his niece, and they just get him riled up, and he starts to act out more and more cruelly. He ends up first killing his firstborn son and several other of his children. He starts to do some pretty sketchy things personally and politically. At one point, this man even attempts suicide. Now, this is all history, right? To be clear, there is zero historical evidence supporting Matthew's story of the, execution of the innocents. Now, there are some things that do allow us to think that maybe this could have actually happened, right? There's nothing in the gospel that is valid. It's not repeated in any other gospel other than Matthew. And there's zero in antiquity, in Roman history, to support it. Other than there are stories of the pharaohs killing some of the Israelite children and some other stories like that. And the narrow span of age and everything of the children in that area he was attempting to murder would have been a relatively low number, maybe a couple of dozen, which, that's not relative to a family, but you follow me here. So there are some who argue that it's not in antiquity, it's not in history, because it just wasn't that big of a deal. Okay? Regardless, imagine Herod, who is losing his mind. And then he begins to hear word, right, that some child, some boy is being born that is a threat to the crown. Now, there is some evidence of this in history that he had received news that there was a threat to the crown. In the gospel, they call it the Messiah, but that does play into the Moses paradigm of, this other leader coming up. So Herod's freaking out, right? He's already losing his mind. He's already gone so far as to kill some of his own sons to try to protect his place in political society. And so he calls on the three magi's, these three dudes that are wise and holy and good and whatever. And he fills their minds with his good intentions. I'm going to argue it's irrelevant if his intentions were actually good or not. In fact, if they were, it probably is more fire for the rest of the story. So he tells the Magi, go find this young boy. Let me know. I want to meet him. I want to get to know him. Okay? So then the Magi's go on their journey, and they are following the stars, as was the normal means of travel then. And as they go out on this mission to find this threat to the throne, this talented young man that is supposedly being born, they get this spark of intuition. Right? Metaphysically, angels are intuition. And this intuition, this angel, warns them, dude, don't forget, Herod is losing his flipping mind. He's already killed some of his own children. He is not interested in meeting this boy for any reason other than to destroy him. And the Magi think, oh, crap, we can't help Herod murder a child. And so they go back and they manipulate Herod and they lead him astray. Herod gets super pissed off. He's like, if you're not going to help me find the kid I'm looking for, fuck it, I'm going to kill them all. And then this decree, according to the gospel, is that, infants to like 2 years old, little boys, anywhere in the area are going to be killed. And people start freaking out, right? Word starts spreading. And whether Joseph heard it through the gossip mill or from his intuition, sort of irrelevant, right? In the story, it's intuition. An angel comes to him and says, get your little boy out of here. And they head to Egypt. Simultaneously, the Magi are realizing the results of their good intentions. In their desire to protect this one threat to the throne, they have written essentially the death sentences of all these other little boys. And they are like, how do we make this right? So they gather supplies. They gather gold. This is money. Any family that is running from the king is going to need money. They bring frankincense. Frankincense is an anti-inflammatory. It is a pain reliever. It helps with stress and anxiety and also mineral and nutrient absorption. And lastly, they bring myrrh. Myrrh fights infection and adds to healing. This was practical, right? Modern day, it'd be formula and diapers. Okay. So they gather up their supplies and they go out looking for these families to give them some support and help. Now, it is really unlikely that any of them are out in the open. It is actually, if you think of the story, right? Pretty unlikely that the inn was full. They were probably hiding him, right? Jesus in the manger was likely in hiding. There was some asshole in his army trying to murder him and anyone else his age and gender. Think Anne Frank, think Underground Railroad, right? And here are the Magi setting out with nothing but hope and a prayer, following their gut instinct, their intuition, looking for the children that they can help escape the doom of Herod's decree. they find many of these children, right? There's no chance that they said, we're going to help one and not all of them. But they do find the manger, the place, according to the gospel, where Jesus was. And they give these gifts to his family, some money and some tools for healing and peace of mind. Led by their intuition and quite logistically, the stars, which were how people navigated during the time, they went out seeking these children that no doubt had potential and something to give to the world and to the families that were trying to protect them. So, what does all this mean metaphysically, right? How does this help on our spiritual path? The wise men represent our stored up knowledge and wisdom from the life of our soul through past lives and past incarnations, that part of us that knows our divinity despite our flesh suit. The higher self, the Christ within that bears the gifts of the soul, just like the Magi carried gifts for the children and their families who were hiding from Herod, right? Herod, metaphysically, is the ego, the sense consciousness, which we all know can be narrow and jealous and destructive. And so, very personally, as metaphysics is able to translate every story, the light within, the soul, the part of us that is awakening within, is being threatened by the Herod of it all, by our ego, by our human experiences, by the human beings around us. And spirit, the universe, our higher self, the Christ light, whatever you choose to call it, within is that spark that comes in threefold, magnified by our faith and desire to hand us what we need to succeed. That inner wisdom, guided by the star of intuition, it finds that place deep inside of us where the true self hides, and it gives it gifts of knowledge, maybe teachers, maybe perfect timing, being right where you belong to get the message that you need. Maybe it's a podcast, something to lighten the load as we awaken to the truth of who we are, to give us some refuge as we wait for the Herod, for the ego to die back, where spirit can lead the way, even here in our human lives. And even all that aside, what can we take personally from the story on a very human level, as if we had watched it unfold on Facebook or something? Here's this baby and others like him who began their lives in fear, in which their very existence was being threatened, and they were on the run, in hiding, and often of humble beginnings. How did Jesus and his family survive? They followed their intuition, as we should. They accepted the help, guidance, and protection of strangers, as we should. Ask for help, beloved. And they never gave up. And from this beginning grew men. Not to mention the evolution of the family members involved, who actually were old enough to remember what they went through. And Jesus? He grew to be an amazing teacher. An amazing teacher. The prosperity of what he did or did not do, the fake news of it all, the omission, the history textbook versions of what existed in his life, they're there, and that's another conversation. But on a human level, this man who started in this way, raised by parents who no doubt carried the scars of the Underground Railroad of it all, the hiding, the fear. He then went on to be brave enough to speak his truth, to flip the tables in the synagogue, and to push against what would have held him down. He followed his heart and his calling. He did the best he could with the life he was given, and he didn't flinch when he said, "These things and greater you can do." Biblical debate aside, this is a story of overcoming and of karma. The wise men, in following their intuition and doing what they believed was right, set forth in activity a pattern of events that then threatened others. And so what did they do? They asked themselves, can we live with this? They couldn't. So they took action. They gathered supplies and they went out to help. Jesus and his family overcoming this, being willing to come back after Herod had died. That takes bravery, right? Was the resistance still there? What about the other children? And then the you and me, the all of us. What have we overcome? Are we doing the very, very best that we can with who we are today? Or are we letting the past hold us back? Or are we like the wise men? Do we need to go fix something? Maybe not for who we hurt, right? The wise men went out. They didn't know that they were going to find that one kid. In fact, that one kid they'd helped. That wasn't the person that they hurt. They now had threatened dozens, maybe more young boys and their families. And so they went out seeking to help as many as they could. The modern day political parallels here with Herod and the threatening of the children and everything else, they're rich. But for today, let's just look at ourselves. Let's listen to the Magi within and to free ourselves from the Herods. Free ourselves from the ego that holds us back, from the narrow-mindedness and the jealousy and the limitation, from the belief that acting out is how we protect ourselves. And let's follow the good examples in the story. Let's listen to our intuition. Let's prepare. And let's learn and grow. That's the best ending to the story. Until next time, beloved, namaste.
Hi beauties, my name is Megan, and I couldn't pass up an opportunity to share who Jennifer Hall really is with all of you. Jennifer is a gifted woman who loves to share the tips and tricks of mastering lessons from the universe through real-life experiences. When I found Jennifer about 2 years ago, I did not know what to expect. My past conditioning had me fearing psychics and avoiding them, and that was something I overcame within my first conversation with Jennifer. She has no desire to control you or make decisions for you, but she will tell you what's best for your highest good, and it's up to you to do the work or not. It's very common for people to seek out a psychic to read the future, and sure, it's human nature to want to know what we don't know, to find the certainty in life. But what you actually get through Jennifer is so much deeper than knowing with certainty. It's really about how to grow through the uncertainty and embrace the power each of us hold deep within our own sovereignty and untapped gifts. Jennifer has helped me grow through many lessons in life. Relationship lessons with my husband of 15 years, my gifted and stubborn children, career lessons that involved overcoming complacency and dealing with difficult bosses, and of course, lessons for my spiritual growth and tapping into and embodying my own authenticity. Her podcast, Lessons from the Universe, is food for the soul. It is channeled wisdom, and it is personal wisdom that she picked up as she learned and grew into who she is today. Jennifer is well known and sought out. I have people from all over the world reaching out to me to provide a referral to her so that she can speak with them and they're able to meet her. This podcast makes it possible for people all over the world to receive her messages and receive the love that she pours into the collective. If you aren't a patron today, please consider becoming one and donating as much as $1 per month. If all of her beloved fans donated just $1, it would make an amazing impact on her offerings to the world. I meet with Jennifer monthly, and I'm also a patron because I believe so much in the lessons from the universe, and I have witnessed the beauty in learning and growing, the beauty in overcoming and smashing the many bubbles of conditioning that I succumbed to in my past. I have a new, more powerful story, and a big part of this story is embracing lessons from the universe. Your story will continue to change, and your donations will help many others change their stories across the globe, allowing the story of the collective to change for the best as well. If you love and live through the lessons from the universe as much as I do, like, share, and become a patron, and watch lessons from the universe take the rest of the world by surprise in the best ways possible. Sending light and love to all of you. Namaste.
I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today for this episode of Lessons from the Universe with Jennifer Hall. If you haven't already, come out and find me on social media, and if you're inspired by the podcast, please consider clicking that little green patron button at the top of the screen. Here, you can help keep us growing and flowing, and you can gain access to what I call Jen in real life. That is patron-only content. If you're wanting to learn more, I recently introduced educational sessions specifically to address people's questions that come up around the podcast. These are the only sessions available to new clients, and you can find details in the About section of my Facebook page. I want to send each of you light and love, clarity and wisdom, and know that whether you realize it or not, there's a little brunette with a podcast who's got your back. Until next time, beloved, namaste.